All right, hello. This is the presentation I put together for crowdsourcing open source intelligence and the OSINT for Good initiatives. So this will be the talk portion, and then we'll take a break and do some workshops. It's going to be a couple of demos in here because we're all hackers and I kind of like to see live demos. It's going to be a recorded demo. Live demo will come when the recording is not in process. So who am I? Alex Minster. About 15 years of information security. I like to say that after 15, I stopped counting. I am a hacker, so usually when I travel to other places and say, hey, I'm also a hacker, so I'm one of those that tinkers with things. I'm on the blue team right now. And then also my training through TraceLabs over 4 years. I did start out just as a participant, then as a judge, then as a senior judge, then as a member of the core team, and then all the way up to being the director of the organization. I always give that journey not as a humble brag, but just to show that if you are passionate about things, you can just work your way into what you're passionate about and ride through. I'm not the best OSINT operative out there. I just keep showing up, keep tinkering things, and keep delving into the passion. Additionally, my role within TraceLabs as the director is a complete volunteer. So we are all volunteers from the top down. We don't get paid to do this. So what is OSINT? Doing just a basic primer of some of the terms. So OSINT is open source intelligence. It's any piece of intelligence that's accessible by civilians. I have civilians in quotes there as well, because one of the things to keep in mind with OSINT is sometimes something may be approachable, may be very accessible for hackers, for people that live in that space that go, hey, just issue a curl command to this port over here and you're going to get some information back, and that is totally awesome information that we would consider open source intelligence. You put that in a report, especially in our domain to law enforcement, they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. So some of it needs to be accessible by civilians. Some of it also may be open source intelligence that might be behind some restricted portals as well. That may not be considered open source intelligence. The definition is relative, and it's defined by a number of factors. Additionally, there's some debate over if breach data is open source intelligence or not. A lot of that also comes down to the rules of engagement as defined by the receiving organization. They may not want to receive breach data. They may have different privacy regulations depending on who you're sending that information to. And additionally, open and ethical are not the same thing. So just because it's open and accessible for you to dig into, it may not be the ethical thing to do. Some examples would be digging through court records. So you might be able to dig through court records on one of your coworkers, finding a lot of dirt, finding a lot of information, and you may say, hey, it's out there, it's public, there's no harm in doing it, but it's not necessarily ethical. Additionally, hopefully everybody had some dinner, but just doing some definitions as well, the difference between the different levels of intelligence. So data, a lot of times it's just that raw bulk information. So sometimes you may pull down information, say, hey, here's a whole bunch of logs, here you go. And that is a common mistake starting out, going, hey, I just got a bunch of information, scrape a bunch of web pages, here you go. That's like just handing over all the raw ingredients for a hamburger. OSINT, with the open source information, that's really just, again, you've refined it a little bit more. That might be like, okay, here's a list of IP addresses. Okay, cool. Also in like missing persons, we go, okay, well, here's all the list of all the family members of the missing person. Here's the Facebook accounts for the missing individuals. You go, okay, that's great, but you haven't refined it. What's the relevance? What does that mean? So it's just information there where, again, it'd be the same as you're looking for a hamburger and they go, okay, well, here's, I cooked it now. So that raw information, I cooked it now, but you have to put it together. You have to figure out how to assemble it and make it the way you want to. And then finally, OSINT is where everything is put together. You have everything as ordered, as desired, as assembled there. So this is just, your animal style burger from In-N-Out Burger, everything put together correctly. Also, as an additional caveat, just because everything is put together correctly, and you may have this excellent piece of information, you may write up a bunch of intelligence for a Fortinet vulnerability. They would say, hey, I did a lot of research, I spent a lot of time putting that together, I'm going to send that over. But your organization doesn't use a Fortinet at all. It's not relevant, it's not what they asked for. You may even put together a report of, hey, here's how many things we've blocked on our firewall over the past month. Okay, great, but you can run into the problem of, that's not what I ordered. The same type of thing here, that you put together this wonderful burger here, but they ordered a chicken sandwich. Great, that's awesome, you assemble it together. It's not relevant, it's not what the individuals are looking for. OSINT can additionally be used in a number of different disciplines. So you can use OSINT for tracking maritime vessels, seeing what's going on with them. I know there was a recent sinking of a boat out near Greece. Some open source intelligence in order to track the vessels that were involved in that. Some other examples would be real estate, just looking into the real estate houses, looking into history of a house. My partner in crime, the other director of TraceLabs, he has done research on some homes that he was thinking to buy, found out that there was quite a story behind the house that he was looking to purchase, and declined to purchase it. Additionally, most of us are familiar with using open source intelligence for network. They have to check out IP addresses, figure out what belongs to what. Additionally, pen testers would do that as well. Some of us may use open source intelligence for reviews. If they're thinking of buying a product, you're saying, hey, here's a video game controller. Which one is the best? Certainly not the one that they took down to visit the Titanic. That would not be the right ratings. But we all do something like that. Additionally, there's examples with social media OSINT. There's record request OSINT as well. And then we dig into like the people OSINT. So some of the examples of people OSINT, I have a whole huge list there. This is also something for awareness that a lot of you may have pieces of information on yourselves that are in areas such as the real estate transactions, criminal history, voter records. If you ever, I think if you visited the White House, it has that information on you as well. That's an open record as well. But signed a little visitor log, marriage records, yearbooks, political leanings. So if you made a campaign donation, that is open records. Additionally, in the state of Wisconsin, some years past, you signed that recall petition. That was all indexed and searchable. So we can search through that. Some people didn't like that, but you could type in a name into a database and find out somebody's address and get a copy of their signature. It's an open record. So some of the things to be aware of. Where OSINT comes into play is the public demands open source intelligence. So the public gets concerned, it can make a lot of racket, especially if individuals are hired to positions of power with known backgrounds that would disqualify them. So if you have somebody that had a background criminal history and they're hired into a political position, you can see a lot of people that throw a fit about that, saying, why didn't you do your homework? Why did you research this person? Why are they in this position of power? Additionally, police or crimes posted online. People go, hey, there was this crime committed. People can do the OSINT on and say, hey, I know exactly where that took place. Why haven't they been arrested? Why isn't this big thing? People get outraged about that. No action is taken. They can trace a criminal on the internet if they go, hey, there's this person that committed a crime. You see this sometimes as well, that some crime is committed, internet sleuths hop into action and go, hey, we figured out who this was. We're pretty sure it's this person. And the authorities say, well, we're still doing some investigation. We don't have any known suspects. We don't really know a whole lot. Examples would be just for the mass shooting incident. You see that the internet gets to work and they start putting together all of this research, all this imagery, all of this the details on the offender when the authorities are a little bit, may not have completed that part of their investigation yet. And then additionally, criminal indicators that are not seen before a crime. People can find things online and say, hey, here's indicators that something's going to happen. People that are problems try to bring up red flags for open source intelligence, and there's no action is taken. The public gets rather upset about that. So, with all those definitions in mind, talking a little bit about TraceLabs for a few slides. So, what is TraceLabs, the organization that I'm involved with? It's a not-for-profit organization that with the mission to help crowdsource the collection of open source intelligence. So all that open source intelligence that we saw, all those different sources, we parse through them through crowdsourcing in order to generate new leads on missing persons. So that was started in Canada by an individual that was involved in search and rescue. So he would go out and physically assist with missing persons or people got lost in the wilderness. And then to try to parallel that for the idea of being missing persons on that you can track on the internet. So why doesn't TraceLabs exist? It's really just the missing person issue continues to worsen. You hear more and more about it, more concerns about human trafficking, more concerns about people that are disappearing. And as the missing persons problem continues to scale, so it continues to explode, the solution needs to scale with it. So that's where we've done the crowdsourcing. And then over the years, it's like we have evolved through a lot of the through a lot of their efforts. So some of our efforts where we're finding a missing person to get featured on Free Think, Advice, a number of articles on us. We did really take off during the pandemic when everybody was sitting around home. They found that middle video there, and people just started showing up in droves to say, hey, how can I help? I'm stuck at home anyways. How can I do some good and get on board? And the TraceLabs model, we have good people that are collecting information and following basic rules. So we do have those guidelines. We do have rules of engagement as well. So they are for official law enforcement requests that have requested the public's assistance with it, and only collecting intelligence passively. So sometimes with that hacker mindset, you go, hey, can I get into somebody's email accounts? Can I get into this? Can I access some of the information? No, we do things passively. Again, we're working with law enforcement. I have seen people that didn't quite make that connection where I go, hey, if you are actively committing a crime while trying to help law enforcement, that's going to end up badly for you. Some hackers still don't make that connection. It's had some interesting stories on that. And while we are doing this as a CTF, where we're gamifying a very serious issue and we're turning it into a game, sometimes I get questions on that. Really, it's just a vehicle. The points and the awards and the competition is really just a vehicle for trying to get at times 600 hackers all together to do one thing. I'm sure Ali and Ryan here could say, trying to get even 60 hackers to get together and do this something at the same time is just a series of madness. So the gamification of the issue and the intelligence has worked out really well. And then we can provide law enforcement with actionable intelligence. So a little bit clarification on crowdsourcing and really just defining crowdsourcing here. So it involves obtaining intelligence from a large group of people who submit their data via the internet. So crowdsourcing can have other definitions where they're sending that information in via any number of sources. For our definition for this talk, we have this involving intelligence over the internet. However, crowdsourcing intelligence can have some serious repercussions. This infamous phrase there of "we did it, Reddit," and what that is from. Does anybody know where that is from? Yeah, so the Boston bombing. So the Boston Marathon bombing occurred. Reddit got to work being internet sleuths, and they started really focusing on an individual that they were certain was the responsible individual. They certainly tracked all sorts of information, found fans, social media, all sorts of things in order to put that out there on the internet, with the community kind of spiraling with that confidence that that was their individual. That turned out to not be that individual. They ended up arresting, I believe, one other individual, another one that law enforcement took out. However, the individual that was being pursued, harassed, their family was harassed, did end up committing suicide, and they found his body about a week later, and that's the law enforcement tape that you see right there. There's some of the consequences for when you have crowdsourcing that gets out of bounds and doesn't have boundaries. So it is one of the cautions to keep in mind. You may easily find a number of investigations where people say, hey, let's all jump in, look at this thing, pull up some open source information, and really drive at this thing hard. You have to keep in mind that there may be some real serious repercussions. That would be an instance of getting back to our model that we want to use OSINT for good and not use OSINT for bad. So another example of crowdsourcing and its impact, this is along the lines of crowdsourcing for good. is that we have a group that I was very privileged, and I stress everything behind privilege, to meet some of the descent irregulars when I traveled internationally. But with Afghanistan and the fall of Kabul, there were a lot of people that were left behind that needed to get out of the country and not be captured, not killed. So this group, the descent irregulars, they enabled a successful evacuation of about 1,000 at-risk women, children, and men from Afghanistan. They got them out. I met two of the individuals. They received some international awards as well. But sitting down and having conversations with the individuals, one of the things that blew me away was when they told me that they had previously participated in some TraceLabs events, and they folded our ideas, our models, into their mission. So they used the same concepts from what we were trying to do. They participated in our event, blew them away, and they said, hey, we can use this type of idea. You can use this type of crowdsourcing in order to gather information, validate that information, really know what we are walking into when we are taking people to the next safe house. What are we going to encounter? What are some of the risks there? What sort of intelligence? What are the guards looking for? Are they digging deep into the phones? What questions are they asking? So they're sort of crowdsourcing all of that to know exactly what they need to do in order to move these refugees. As a bit of a visual for us doing crowdsourcing, when we crowdsource everything through our CTF, here's a bit of a visual of what that looks like. So every point on that, every dot is an accepted piece of intelligence. The steeper the incline, the more extreme, more valuable that piece of intelligence. They may have found intelligence on a missing person after they went missing. After they were last seen, they see some activity and submit that. This is just a great visual representation of what crowdsourced intelligence looks like, what that flow looks like. Additionally, having some numbers here for some of the things that we gather a lot of information on the submissions that come in, the submissions that are rejected, the amount that are accepted. So as you can see, we have a number of different categories. Very rarely do we see anything on the dark web. One of the more important categories that we have are the ones that advance the timeline. That is where we have the proof of life, proof of activity since the individual went missing. Here we found 6 pieces of information. I have this label at the bottom. This is a local edition. So when we just did this in like a small group, which is a small amount of teams, this is the amount of information we had. Scaling that up and leveraging crowdsourcing to where we can max out the amount of participants that we can handle, which is about 600 people at such an event like DEF CON, this is how the numbers change. So the same 4 hours, look at that amount of information that we were able to pull through in 4 hours, that we had close to 4,000 accepted pieces of intelligence. We have 629 pieces of intelligence that advanced the timeline. Absolutely astonishing. We were, last DEF CON, we were able to assist the FBI in closing out missing persons. That was a phenomenal effort there. It was really just to demonstrate the power of, like, when you crowdsource, you have everybody that's overlapping information, independently verifying things, so people are broken up into teams of 4. And that also kind of helps control that spiral where people might want to get into some speculation or really dive into things, is that you have separate groups that if they're starting to find the same piece of intelligence, you have that additional validation. Some people may find things unique and they show up as outliers. When we do our reporting at the end, we go, okay, so there's this outlier that out of all the 50 teams, only 1 team found this thing. Is it valid, or is it something that's getting a bit speculative? But if you see things that come up and say, okay, out of the 50 teams, 27 of them found the same piece of information, that gives us some solid level of confidence. We do vet it when we do the reporting, but it gives us a solid amount of confidence that it is valid because it was independently found 27 different times. Additionally, while we have all these categories where we're just getting this big flow of information, one of the big things that we cultivate is with the TraceLabs Most Valuable OSINT Award. Went from kind of having people game the system, kind of min-max the system and say, hey, how can I get the most amount of points? And we wanted to develop that for having some of the critical, highly actionable pieces of information, unique in OSINT technique used, high level of difficulty to find, And really one of that bottom point often is the one that distinguishes between which one we give the award to, is that exceptional context and supporting evidence provided. Now, this can also parallel into hacking, pen testing, writing up reports for your boss, is that you can present that intelligence, but if you don't have the exceptional context and the supporting evidence that's provided, it often gets missed. I'm sure, pen testers, pen testing companies, when you put together the report really is everything. There's a motto up there that you hack for show and report for go. You get paid based on the report, and this concept also helps cultivate it. I will have the opportunity to share some examples of the most valuable OSINT and get some ideas as to how individuals are going that extra mile. And then finally, as I pointed out, we do have the reporting and results. So we're not just accumulating a bunch of information, but we are reporting it out to law enforcement. And that is an important distinction as well, is that we're reporting this back to law enforcement and law enforcement exclusively. Sometimes we get asked, hey, can you help me find a missing person? Can you help me locate this and get that information back to me? Unfortunately, we don't give the information back to families because there are some sad situations to where the family is the problem. We've seen instances where an individual was trafficked, and it was really the family or the uncle that was trying to make money talk trafficking their own daughter, their own niece. So of course, when they send this request saying, hey, we really want this information back, for reasons like that, we don't give the information back to the family, we give it to law enforcement. And maybe out of all the cases that won, there is one that had a hint of law enforcement issues with, you may want to take some sensitivity because law enforcement may have been involved in the disappearance. I think in that rare instance, it's a matter that you just work with different agencies and just make sure to call that out to them saying, hey, there may be some law enforcement involvement with this. We send over the tidied up raw data so their analysts can dig through everything and replicate all of our steps. That's the value of having it be open source intelligence, is that they can repeat those steps as well. Circling back to what I said earlier, that it's not one of the things where they have to issue like some web requests or download a bunch of tools, do all sorts of cyber backflips in order to get access to that information. It's something that they can validate and explain as well. And we send over that executive summary of key points. Some of the frequently asked questions that we get with the reports is we get the common question. Can anybody want to guess what the most common question is that we get? Who are you? Well, from law enforcement, yes, they have the who are you. So we do have that in the executive summary saying like who we are, what we do, what our model is, what the process is. For a frequently asked question that we get from individuals or not necessarily law enforcement, one of the very common ones is, have you found people? The answer to that is yes. We have found missing persons. We have contributed to the successful recovery of missing persons. We've also contributed to what I would call like closure of a missing persons case, where we do find where they were deceased or they otherwise items befell them. So we do have some of those. We don't announce those. We don't really take the information back out there that we have found missing person. A lot of times we don't get that immediate feedback either. That's probably one of our second most common questions is, do you ever hear back from law enforcement? We don't really. It's very much like a one-way street, and that's what makes law enforcement very comfortable. They are very risk averse. So we'll send them over the report. They go, awesome, thank you. And we may never hear from them again. And we see a case closed out. One of the big indicators is that we have law enforcement constantly contacting us for us to do it again and again. We have more law enforcement organizations globally as well that want to be involved with us. So certainly word is getting around of our successes. If we were complete failures and we're not contributing to helping the problem, then certainly law enforcement is wise enough to see through it as well. We also help cultivate OSINT education. So a bit of an idea here is that we give information, give education and teach people on techniques, trying to reinforce that OSINT is more than just tools. Sometimes I get newcomers that come in and say, okay, what tools do I need to use? What do I need to build? the landscape changes constantly. You'll have GitHub repos that go down. You have Reddit may pull their API, and you go, okay, great. I don't have that access. Twitter may start blocking things as well, and you go, okay, great. You have a lot of OSINT professionals there that may be sitting there saying, okay, now what do I do? If you know techniques, you know how to maneuver around it and still get the information that you're looking for. Some other items is just enumerating through the data. So there are social media profiles that often overshare. These are a gold mine for us. You can find a lot of information to pivot through. And I'm sure that anybody that's done OSINT, when they find a social media profile, you may be looking at an individual that has everything locked down, and you go, man, I can't find anything. Well, then you find the aunt of that person, and that aunt shares everything. And you go, oh, good grief, this is great, this is awesome. Let me dig into that. So, also doing a quick demo because we love demos. So this is a quick demo, just really digging through one of the tools and one of the techniques of what's my name.app. An item here of note is really just that additionally that validation of the information that you have. So here we're running a search on Human Decoded, who is the other director of TraceLabs. And you run a search and you get all of the different items where Human Decoded comes up. We know he's the other director of TraceLabs. So we go, okay, well, he's a fellow hacker, so let's take a look at the GitHub. Here's some information. Here's a picture that you can now pivot off of and go, okay, that's a picture. His repos, he has some TraceLabs repos in there, so it's more than likely the individual that we're looking for. It may also come up with, the Twitter account, which again, the username does not mean that it's that person. So here we take the Twitter handle, Human Decoded, we check that out, and we go, that comes back as a different Human Decoded. Not really any indicators that that is the same Human Decoded. When we dig into our workshop later, we're going to go through something in a similar process where you can see the need to sort of dig into the different results and have those points of validation of what the real accounts are. In this instance, if you dug through it, he is human_decoded, and when you get that Twitter website, you validate that because he's using the same profile picture that you saw at GitHub. So you're able to make that connection and say, okay, those accounts are the same. So an example of the most valuable OSINT. So one of the examples that we had was missing person. This is a submission that we saw quite a few individuals come up with. That the missing person was that the individual went missing. They found a post that says, hey, this is my cousin, she's safe. A lot of people submitted that and saying, okay, they're all good, they're all safe. Let's close this out then. Like according to the group mod, according to the cousin, we have a Facebook post that says this person is safe and sound. The MBO, however, didn't necessarily take that at face value and dug a little bit further. Where they ended up digging further was they ended up pivoting through like an aunt's Facebook account to find a photo shoot that the missing person had done, went to the photographer's website and dug through information. Photographers oftentimes love having all sorts of portfolios open on their site. So the actual evidence that's submitted obviously blurred out, but they were able to find pieces of information where you go, okay, there's the missing person in a hot tub. They're safe and sound. You have individuals that are there. You're able to see that information. You're able to see video, geolocation of where they are, what they're doing, taking hikes. So you're able to validate who they are with. I think additionally, they had somewhere they ended up seeing like the truck, and again, like photographers are great because they don't blur out the license plate. So that truck was used as a cross-reference, saying, okay, here's the truck that they were with, here's the license plate for that. You give that over to law enforcement, they can follow up those pathways and say, okay, we know geolocating where they said they were, we know that they claim to be safe, have the truck, have that information, and are able to go through that. All right. Some of the other initiatives that we do, So not just the CTS, but we have made a virtual machine. So we've made an OSINT virtual machine as well. One of the fascinating things that OSINT VM is when I was traveling over to Madrid, our download server for that VM broke, like on the Wednesday that I was traveling. I could not believe the amount of emails and messages and everything coming out of the woodwork for people that couldn't use it. We have law enforcement saying, hey, we use this, we can't download it, what's going on? We have people that were using it in order to do an exam saying, hey, where'd the download go? I have an exam in in 48 hours and I can't download the recommended tool for it. We had no idea it was being used that heavily until people couldn't download it anymore. I also met some individuals that said, oh yeah, we use your VM for training. They're training individuals with the United Nations for some of their task forces that they use our virtual machine. We also have the virtual machine. We do that in close coordination with offensive security. So it is a version of Kali that we work more closely with offensive security in order to develop that. Another big advantage for our OSINT VM is that in our Discord server, we have the developers that are there. You get stuck on something, you have a question, can't get it to work, running it on Mac M1 chip, and it's throwing some errors at you. You can jump into a Discord server and talk to these individuals that need it. They'll get some information back. And that's really one of the valuable things with an operating system. You have different flavors of Linux that may be wonderful, but may be difficult in order to get support with. We also do podcasts that have a lot of information. One of the other things that I put up there is that 24/7. One of the things that we recently launched or relaunched in the past couple months is what's known as ongoing operations. So we have cases that are up and available 24 hours a day. People can join in and process those cases as well. So even if you go, okay, there's a CTF that's occurring, can't participate in it, busy that weekend, okay, that's fine. You can jump into ongoing operations as well. And those are more collaborative where everybody's kind of looking at that same picture. You're able to share techniques and validate each other's work as well. So we'll have a workshop after the end with our videos. We have a lot of details for how do you get started in the CTFs, how do you install that virtual machine. We have videos for that. And there's a workshop after this presentation that we'll dig into. So one other crowdsourcing effort that I like to speak to is Traffic Cam. So Traffic Cam is an app that you can use on your phone whenever you go travel, visit hotels. You take pictures of various things in the hotel. Here it's showing like take pictures of the seating, take pictures of the bed. Because with human trafficking, they often pose their victims on beds, seating, etc. This information, this database, if you say, okay, this is where I'm, it asks for, what hotel are you staying at, what room number, you put that into a database. This isn't a publicly accessible database, but it is used by law enforcement. I told law enforcement about this, and some of their feedback has been, hey, this is phenomenal. We're using this. We're accessing this for cross-reference, and they're really leaning into the use of it. So it's one of the things that if you say, hey, how can I do some simple things to contribute to the effort? This is one of them. When I travel, whenever I'm getting ready to check out, this also helps make sure that I don't leave anything behind because I'm taking pictures of everything in the room, and I go, oh wait, I left that next to the couch there. It's like good thing I caught that. We'll just take pictures of the room on your way out, upload that information. It helps out. So it's just something fairly simple and straightforward that you can do. Additionally, what's next for TraceLabs? Talking about the future. We're going to keep doing better reporting. So that's one of the things that we have evolved and done some crowdsourcing efforts for that. One of the key things to call out now is we're at a point with our reporting where we can go from running a case on a Saturday to having the reports back and polished and ready to be delivered by that next Friday. So it is very handy and very quick turnaround. So it was one of the things that we really wanted to focus on, especially before opening up ongoing operations, is that we don't have a backlog of all this information collected. It takes us a month to get through it and get it over to law enforcement. That's not going to be as valuable for law enforcement. They want information that's fresh. They said, we either give it to us right away, don't give it to us at all, with some of the feedback that we got. So keeping things ongoing. And additionally, pulling together that OSINT for good. We keep doing collaborations with Operation Safe Escape, Innocent Lives Foundation, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, on and on and on, trying to bring all of this together. It's also one of the things that I want to bring more to the forefront with DEF CON is highlighting that OSINT for good, highlighting those hackers doing good things, because DEF CON has that reputation of why, people asking, why are thousands of criminals gathering in the Vegas heat? And we want to kind of turn that around and say, not all of us are criminals, not all of us are here to break into things, some of us use OSINT for good, changing communities and really just kind of helping to ripple things up. So, and with that, that's the end of the talking part of the presentation. So I don't have any, I leave the space for any free form item, questions and answers. So if anybody has questions in the audience or via our call-in line through Trent, they can feel free to voice them. Yes.
I feel like most of my exposure to OSINT with a graphic of techniques, tools, sources. So like I never see a holistic approach or like how to structure investigation, that sort of thing. How to actually follow up on.
Yeah. So and you're right that your question was, or really the statement was, that you see a lot of OSINT that's just kind of grab bag of techniques and not really putting together the how-to for the investigation, the investigative life cycle. And you are right, there are a lot of groups and organizations, there are writers that they put together thick books of all the different techniques, which come in handy in that realm. If you're stuck on something saying, hey, I need to run an IP address, I've done this tool, done this other tool, done this third tool, you pick up the book and go, okay, well, here's 5 more other tools, and that will get you that traction. So there is value in that, but you kind of have to know what you're looking for, that intelligence process. We do some of that education when we do our workshops. There are some other good books out there. I can speak to Ray Baker in Deep Dive. I'll try to highlight that book later, but she does a good job of, I've had a discussion with people even this morning on it, that that's a good book for seeing the investigative process, really just kind of building up what you want to do and not focusing so much on that collection part of the intelligence life cycle, to really go, okay, here's how I get all the information. You have all those stages that come up before you get to that point and after that point. But you are correct that there is a need for building that investigation basics. What are you looking at? What's the question that's being asked? How do I need to put all this information together? What's the recipient looking for? That answer it?
Yeah, I'll be interested. I'll look at the group.
Oh, yeah. So, and I'll try to share that afterwards as well. All right. So we'll do a break for any sort of announcements. Really wanted to give that opportunity that people wanted to